Hi, good afternoon, everyone, to the March 15th, 2021 office hours put on by the assessment team in the performance office at CSDE. Today, we're going to be talking specifically about accessibility and accommodations, as well as our alternate assessments. My name is Abe Christ. I'm a bureau chief in the performance office. I am joined today by my colleagues who are going to do most of the heavy lifting on this presentation, Deirdre Ducharme and Janet Stuck, and then also behind the scenes help facilitating this webinar is Michelle Rosado. And then I also know that we are joined today also by our partners at Cambium Assessments, Inc., and they are on the line too if there's any questions that are really directed towards them. So again, thank you for joining today. It's great to see everyone. I hope everybody is doing well. I'm going to turn it over to Deirdre and tell us a little bit about the session and then kind of get into the meat of the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you with us this afternoon. We know you have an extremely busy schedule, and we just want to take some time this afternoon to give you some updates regarding the upcoming Smarter Balanced NGSS and alternate assessments beginning at the end of this month. Actually, science has been underway for grade 11 since February, but we know that the spring summative assessment is soon approaching. So we want to take some time to go over some updates related to accommodations and accessibility, and then we want to allow time for you to ask any questions that you have. Please use the question feature on your WebEx screen to ask any questions. At the end of this session, we will have an opportunity to address any unanswered questions, and you're also welcome to use the chat feature, or rather raise your hand if you want to ask questions in person. Next slide, please. So we've included our contact information. Feel free to email us any of your questions. You're certainly welcome to give us a phone call as well. Email tends to be a bit easier this time of year, but please use this information as a point of reference if you need to reach any of us during the upcoming days and months ahead. Next slide, please. We've also included additional contact information for our colleagues who are responsible for the delivery of the Connecticut SAT School Day, as well as the submission of appeals and test irregularities that may come about in the upcoming weeks. And we've also included our administrative personnel, Marlene Chamaroy, and she's certainly available to support your work in the weeks ahead. This afternoon, we're going to cover just a couple of things related to Smarter Balance and NGSS, and then Janet's going to share some updates specific to the alternate assessment. There really isn't a whole lot of new information in the world of accommodations and accessibilities, but we do have a few reminders for you. Next slide, please. As a reminder, many of you have asked along the way when to expect the hard copy test manuals for science, for Smarter Balance, as well as the alternate assessment. And while these materials are posted to the portal for download and printing, you should have, if you haven't received hard copies from our testing company, Cambium, they are on the way. So hard copy manuals should be in our offices, our district administrator offices, by March 19th. So if you haven't received them by early next week, feel free to give us a call and we can find out any specifics regarding the shipment. As another reminder, we want to make sure that our schools have submitted any of the designated supports and accommodations in the TIDES system. There are a variety of ways that our school administrators do this. Sometimes our schools will do individual entries within the TIDES system to set those designated supports and accommodations. Other districts use an upload process, whether it's an Excel upload of data that they collect internally, or if they're doing an upload through their IEP vendor. So before testing begins, just make sure that those designated supports and accommodations are set. And then we do have one new resource specific to the reader options available on our statewide assessments, specifically science, reading, and math. And we know that there are different classifications for the reader tools dependent on the assessment, dependent on what specifically is being read to the student and how it's being read to the student. So for instance, we have designated supports for text-to-speech of science items, math, and ELA items. But then separate from that, we have a different protocol for those students who require a reader, whether it's a human reader or a reader through the embedded text-to-speech. Those are considered accommodations. And what this new tool does is it breaks out the various reader options. It describes the particular subtest that the option's available for. It delineates whether the support is a designated support or accommodation, and that it also provides the type of documentation that might be needed when requesting these supports. We've included a hyperlink here. You're welcome to check it out. It's also posted to the portal and the CSDE website. We hope that this is a useful tool for your teachers. Next slide, please. As a reminder, before your students begin summative testing, we encourage that they have an opportunity to try a Smarter Balanced or NGSS practice test. And it can be done formally by having your test administrators use the TA practice and training site that's available on the portal. And certainly teachers can also administer these practice tests a little less formally by accessing the training test icon on the portal and essentially choosing a practice test for administration that way. So the point is there are a number of ways that you can access these practice tests, but we want our students to have an opportunity to try out the test format so they know how to navigate an online assessment, and so that students also know how to use the different tools that are available to them, whether it's the highlighting feature or enlarging or decreasing the font. We want students to feel comfortable with how to maneuver the different types of test items. And to that point, we've also included a link to the item type tutorial. And you might be aware of this resource, but it might be worthwhile in having your teachers take a look at it and share the different item types with their students. These item types are applicable for both math, English language arts, and NGSS science. So this particular tutorial will give students as well as educators an opportunity to simulate the different types of items and see exactly how they work. So this is a useful tool, and I recommend that you share it with your colleagues. Next slide, please. As a reminder, students who qualify for the text-to-speech of the ELA reading passages, this is an embedded accommodation. We do have a corresponding decision guideline that must be completed for those eligible students. A common question that we receive is, how do I submit this form electronically? So on our website and portal, we have the electronic version of this form. And where you see the arrow pointed on your screen, there is an embedded hyperlink that either your administrative assistant or your teacher, whomever is submitting this form, can click directly on that link. And it will direct the person to our Qualtrics survey in which this information is submitted. So just as a reminder, we recommend that these decision guidelines are entered electronically before the start of the testing window. Although there isn't a specific deadline, we just encourage that the forms are submitted as soon as you know that you have students that qualify. And again, this particular guideline gives us specific student characteristics about those children who qualify for the embedded text-to-speech of the ELA reading passages. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to give us a call or send us an email. Next slide. We're also getting questions about medical exemptions. And while we do have information in Appendix B of our assessment guidelines, I just wanted to reiterate how the medical exemptions work. So students will essentially qualify for a medical exemption if they are physically unable to participate in any kind of school, homebound, or instructional services in a hospital or other environment. So these are these are situations that are oftentimes rare and kind of extreme when you think about the seriousness of a student's health. So if you have a student who is currently undergoing medical treatment or is in school for a limited number of hours a day due to an illness, these students wouldn't necessarily qualify for medical exemption, but we would recommend that based on the student's current health situation, that you might want to delay testing until later in the test window to determine how the student is feeling and if there's any opportunity to have that student participate in testing. If something has come up recently, I encourage that you set up an emergency 504 plan in case that hasn't already happened, just to make sure that you have those accommodations put in place for both instruction and then any type of assessment that the student may receive over the course of the spring months. If it turns out that your student is not well enough to participate in any kind of instructional or homebound services, and if the student has essentially missed the last day of makeup testing for the Connecticut SAT school day, if that student's in grade 11, or for your students who are taking the Smarter Balanced or science assessments in the elementary and middle school, if you're nearing the end of the testing window and you know that student's not going to be in school, then please give us a call or send us an email and we will work with you in providing a petition. Medical exemption does require a letter from the student's treating physician that provides some information about the nature of the student's illness. But essentially reach out to us later in the testing window and we will work with you to provide you the necessary information to move forward with a medical exemption. If you have any questions about this, again, please reach out. Next slide, please. As always, we have a variety of resources for you. So this particular slide outlines some specific resources for Smarter Balance and NGSS related to designated supports that we have available for your English learners. We have a variety of student materials that you can certainly use with your kids as you're preparing for the upcoming testing window, whether it's accessing the hard copy periodic tables for grade 8 and grade 11 NGSS. We have a cheat sheet for keyboard commands, and we have translated test directions. Whatever materials your students might need in preparation for testing, please check out our portal. And if you're wondering where something is and you can't find it, again, please let us know, because more than likely there's a brochure or a flowchart or something that will give you the information that you're looking for. I'm now going to pass this the presentation to Janet.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. And as always, thank you for what you do. So I'm going to chat with you a little bit about the alternate assessment. So one of the critical components to allow a student to participate in the alternate assessment for those students who have a significant cognitive disability is the alternate assessment eligibility form. This is submitted into the data entry interface by the trained teacher. This form was due by February 15th. We recognize that there are many PPTs that have not occurred prior to that, so decisions are still being made. The important factor here is that if your student is going to be participating in an alternate and your trained teacher has completed and submitted the eligibility form, they must contact the Connecticut Help Desk to ensure that the alternate assessment flag indicator is set within the TIDE system. This allows the teacher to access the required materials as well as the test for the student. So this is a critical piece that all your trained teachers need to make sure they have contacted the help desk if their submission is after February 15th. A little caveat here too, that because we wear different hats, I wanted to mention, if your student is participating in an alternate assessment, in grades 3 through 8 and 11, and your teacher is now recognizing that they submitted the form after February 15th, please be sure to contact your English learner assessment coordinator to ensure that the student who might be an English learner has is on the right side of participating in the LAS LINCS, our English language proficiency assessment. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of tools available for you in the Connecticut portal regarding preparation for testing. So you'll see here, and we've hyperlinked them here, the responsibility checklist for the CTAA and a separate one for the CTAS because, again, they're different test designs. So one of the critical things that your teacher who would be administering the CTAA is that they need to access the required directions for test administration. This is a grade and subject specific script, and it includes some manipulatives for the math portion. So it's important that they download this and that they really review the manuals for both the CTAA and the CTAS, which are available in the alternate assessment section of the portal. And like the standard assessments, it's important to set up test schedules. Many of these students have related service activities with OT, PT, speech. So you want to make sure that those teachers are kept in the loop if you're setting up a testing session, and these students would be tested individually. And you want to make sure that their testing environment and the accommodations that are indicated in their IEP are provided. These students typically will need more than one opportunity to test. They may need several breaks, and your teachers are attuned to their frustration levels and can provide opportunities for them to do the appropriate number of items. Next slide, please. So for those teachers who are administering the CTAA, of course, they are trained. They've submitted the alternate assessment eligibility form for the student, and then they can access the directions for test administration. And you'll see that these are within the portal under the preparing for testing section. They will see it in the drop-down menu. They will see a grade and subject specific DTA. They can download it to a device or print it for their reference. It's what they will be using to administer the test. And please make sure that it is destroyed securely following testing. Next slide, please. And as a reminder, the DTAs must be followed verbatim. This is a script that makes this test more standardized, so that it's important to follow the script with that in mind. And the teacher should also be familiar with the test administration manual. They go hand in hand. Next slide, please. So one of the features that we have with our alternate assessments is called the early stopping rule. A very small percentage of our students who are eligible for an alternate assessment do not have an observable mode of communication. They may be learning to communicate. They may not be using aware of cause and effect yet. They may be nonverbal. They may not understand sign language or assistive technology or AAC. So those are students who potentially would not be able to respond to an item in the CTAA or CTAS. In these cases, there are specific rules that we've established, which are available on the alternate assessment section of the portal that the trained teacher follows to ensure that those students are not overtaxed for testing. So essentially, they meet the criteria of the early stopping rule, and they can stop testing. Next slide, please. So typically these students receive, are the most complex support students. They receive the most complex supports, even when compared with their peers who are also significantly cognitively challenged. Students who are eligible for the ESR typically have an uncertain response to stimuli, meaning that if the teacher asked the question, the response would vary depending on when and how the teacher asked the question. So, or they may not respond at all. And these are students who, like our alternate students, have significant adaptive behavioral needs, and they have not established a mode of communication. And you'll see that indicated in their IEP, that they are working on those goals and objectives. And they have a pervasive need for adult support throughout their lives, like many of our alternate students. Next slide, please. So for the procedures for this, teachers attempt to administer the first 4 items for each subtest. If the student does not have a mode of communication and cannot respond to the test items, the test must be paused. And I want to emphasize the pausing of the test first, because it's important to pause the test, not submit it, assuming that the student qualifies for the early stopping rule. So the trained teacher would review session 4 of the training. We have a flow chart that's on the portal for reference that they can refer to. And you, as the district administrator for testing, it would be important for you to be in the know about this potential student for the early stopping rule. And then you would contact either Deidre or myself to discuss the next step. Next slide, please. So like our standard accommodation section, we also have several resources related to the alternate assessments. And as decisions are still being made, I wanted to remind you that we do have the alternate assessment eligibility form in an annotated form to help the PPT teams make those decisions. But in terms of preparing for testing, these are the links to the activities that you and your teacher should be doing at this time. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, we will be having office hours throughout the testing window. And those of you who are working on the standard assessments, there is an important one, particularly on April 8th and April 15th, to discuss the remote proctoring tool. So I think that might be our last, yes. So at this time, we're going to take some questions. If you would like to raise your hand virtually, Abe will help us respond to, if he can see the hands.
So Janet, I'm monitoring the question box. So far, we've managed to send everyone back an answer, although I just saw one come in. So you can type your question in, that's fine, we can take it like that. And then, as Janet mentioned, the raise hand feature. Michelle, can you, do you know who has raised their hand on that?
No one.
Oh, no one, okay.
We'll give you a
So
little wait
I'll
time.
take, yeah, we'll do a little wait time. In the meantime, I will take a question here. The question is about NGSS. Is the testing environment for the NGSS the same for remote testing and in person? I can take that one. Yeah, it's the same test delivery system used. There is a trick for NGSS, or not a trick, but the in-person test is actually different than the remote version. So Just be mindful, if you start a test in one location, you can't finish in the other. But it is this using the same test delivery system. Next question, any news on the waiver from the state, federal government? Will these tests be part of accountability? Janet D, I'll take this one, I guess, unless you guys want to. That's a good question. So just a little bit about that. We had applied for a waiver back in January, or might have been early February. And then subsequent to that, the new administration came in and they actually sort of reconfigured the process for waivers. And without getting into all the details, we might have to reapply, but that's really not relevant. What they did say as they messaged their new process, that basically, yes, applications for accountability waivers are going to be taken, and I don't want to say 100% granted, but just about as close as you can get. So rest easy, we're still waiting on that process to work through, and it looks like we will be getting a waiver for our accountability calculations at the end of this year. Another question, are there any recommendations on the best way to proctor fully remote students? I mean, I could go a little bit on this one, but maybe Janet D, I'll turn this over to you, given maybe this one's more directed at students who might be receiving any supports or accommodations.
Most of what we're sharing about the remote assessment will be shared in April 8th and April 15th on the webinar. We will also be providing guidance prior to that. We're developing the guidance now, so we don't have any solid answers for you yet. But you can imagine that in the remote environment, those accommodations that are when you're in person are provided as a non-embedded support or accommodation are not, have to be thought through carefully to make sure that they're provided to students in a remote setting. And Deirdre, did we post that document or not yet?
So no, I actually, yes, the document Janet's referring to is it's a guideline document for providing non-embedded designated supports and accommodations for remote testing. And we currently have this document for interim remote testing, but we updated it so that it's specific for remote assessment, especially given the fact that our summative tests are secure and the interims are not. So the document Janet's referring to is available on the portal, but we will be providing this resource along with all of the other remote testing materials like the TAM, and we have guidelines, and we have a assistive technology coordinator manual. So we'll certainly provide that information to you prior to testing. In addition to what Janet said, as far as being thoughtful about your remote testers and the types of designated supports and accommodations that they may need, as well as those that are non-embedded, I would just recommend that you be thoughtful in your planning so that the test size groups that you create are manageable for your test examiner, so that instead of maybe administering a test to like 30 or 40 kids in a test room, in the perfect world, the recommendation would be that the test groups are smaller. And you might also want to be thoughtful in arranging test groups with, when you think of your kids who are receiving accommodations, maybe group some of those kids with like accommodations, so that as the proctor is administering remotely, he or she might be able to better troubleshoot if any questions come up with those testers who are using the embedded and non-embedded accommodations. So that's a tip, and certainly we can talk more about that on April 8th.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Dee. So a couple more questions floated in here. keep them coming if you all want to just write them in. So, and there's a lot of interest again in the remote testing. So if the NGSS is different between the in-person and remote, is Smarter also different between in-person and remote? So I mentioned earlier that NGSS there's a different form, so just to be mindful of that. For Smarter, it's the same form. So to use an example, if you start at home, you could conceivably finish if you were to go back to school, or vice versa. If you start at school, you could conceivably finish at home. Next one is, did I hear you say that NGSS can't be taken part remote and part in person? Is that true for SBA? So I think I just answered the SBA one. If I misspoke to what the intention is, that if you start a science test, you can take it remote, you can take it in person. You just have to complete the test, start and complete in the same location. Okay. And then another remote, sorry D, sorry Janet, but the remote is popular here. Do the remote learners and in-person learners need a different session ID? Yes. You have to create a session for one or the other. There's a path you have to take. I'm going to kick this one back to you, Janet or Dee. If a child is out of the country during the testing window, is there anything that needs to be completed? What if the student was going to take the alternate assessment? I'll let you handle that one since alternate is mentioned.
I think more information will be coming on this, but based on my experience with the Lost Links, and Jen, you can jump in if you know, there's a lot of international security rules about internet use outside of the continental United States, both from the other country and from here. So sometimes those situations don't work in the same way. So there's no, we don't have the full answer for that part. And in terms of the alternate, we don't have a remote alternate option right now. So that guidance was put out earlier, and that's on the portal as well.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I'm not sure exactly the first part of that question about being tested outside the country. If that student is enrolled still in PSIS and is not tested, excuse me, then the student is simply a non-participant. It's not the end of the world. There isn't anything that you have to complete or anything like that. But again, assuming the student is still in PSIS, the student and the student were not to be tested, they're not a participant.
And aid to that point, we would make the same recommendation for your students who qualify for an alternate. If your students are remote learners and cannot come to school to participate in alternate testing, then we recommend that you maintain some level of documentation locally, so that you know, in looking in the year ahead or at subsequent PPTs, at least you have some information about the fact that the student did not participate in testing in spring of 2021. So again, because we don't have a remote option for these students, they simply would count as non-participants, and as long as we receive approval for the waiver, there aren't any you know, negative consequences, at least from the federal level. So if you have any specific questions about that, certainly reach out to us. But again, just as a reminder, we don't have an option for those remote learners who qualify for an alternate assessment.
Okay, thanks, Dee. Thanks, Janet. Another one came in here. Oh boy, it's about NGSS and SB again. and Smarter again about remote. So would you mind repeating the differences between NGSS and Smarter and taking it in school versus remote? So I'll just try. Smarter is the same form home and in school, so you can cross locations and complete the test. However, for NGSS, if you start a form in one or the other, you have to complete it in that location because the forms are different. Okay, so I don't see any more questions, nor do I see any raised hands. We'll give it 30 seconds. If you have any thoughts, you can. Thoughts. Another one came in. Okay, is there any information yet about how these results will be reported? There is some concern from teachers about individual reporting. Yeah, that's a good question. We're doing a lot of thinking about what the reports are going to look like in the summer when results are released. I would rest easy that although I can't give you any specifics what they will look like, it's meant for distribution. It's not going to be looking like a normal year, more than likely. Especially at the group reporting level, whether it's a school or a district, and conceivably even the individual student report level, if there's some language in there just showing caution and so forth. If there's ever a year where we have to be particularly cautious about the way we use these results, it's this year. So we are thinking about that quite a bit. Okay, we'll give it another 30 seconds. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Oh, we have a raised hand. Hold on one second.
Go ahead, Heather. You just have to unmute your microphone. Heather Rigotti.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, sorry
Can
about
you hear me
that.
now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you recommend that anyone who is going to be a remote proctor attend the training on April 8th?
I mean, it's really up to you, Heather. We're, it's the training will be recorded and so forth. So there's really, if they can't, you can just hit record or hit replay when we post it. And then we're also, although we're not going to do exactly the same thing, we're going to cover a lot of the same, like the big picture things on the 15th. So it's really up to you.
And Heather, Cambian created an online training for test administrators. It's similar to the old TA certification class that we had as an option. And so this training is specific for remote assessment. And while it's not required, we are highly recommending that our remote proctors review the training. So we will be releasing the link to the training and any other supplemental materials shortly. But I recommend the training. I think it's great because it shows the TAs exactly how to administer a remote assessment, and it also shows how to use the various tools to communicate with your remote learners or remote testers rather. So whether it's through the chat or the video conference feature, the screen sharing, and it also shows what the students will see as remote testers. So I think maybe, Jen, it's about 30 minutes long. The takeaway is that it's optional, but it will be a great resource for your proctors.
Yeah, I've done that, the remote proctor training, and I guess I was wondering what your session on April 8th is going to offer that's different.
Yeah, it's probably not as like the actual certification course is a little more about the actual process, whereas The one on April 8th will be a little bit more high level. Like, so for instance, talking about things like, you know, the difference between the Smarter and NGSS, and then also just stressing, I mean, we'll probably be talking a little bit about, I mean, there's all this focus on remote, but also reminding folks that the majority of students are probably taking the tests in person. So a little bit higher level and not about the sort of the real details.
Thank you.
So there was a question that came in via the chat or the question box. Where can we access the Cambium training video? So that would have been sent to your DAs, your district administrators, about a week and a half ago. And it was also in the most recent student assessment news. But I know who you are here because we can identify the question folks, and I will email that link to you.
Abe, this is Jen from CAI. It's also on the portal under remote administration. There is a link called remote testing training course.
Thanks,
Just
Jen.
to reiterate, we promise that the material for remote summative testing will be accessible and well organized. So currently on the portal, we do have a tab for remote testing, but it focuses on the interim remote assessment materials. We will have something similar that's specific for summative testing. So you won't have to do any kind of like hunt and peck on our portal. We'll keep everything together. So you'll have the guidelines, the Q&A, the link to the training, the optional training, certification class, etc. So everything will be ready at your fingertips when, for when you're ready to go. So we will communicate the release of those materials shortly.
And since I had a minute to respond here, as opposed to emailing it, I just dropped the last student assessment news into the chat, and on the first page, it has a link to that certification course. Okay, seeing no more questions, thank you for attending, everyone. The CSDE team as well as the CAI team, thank you, and thank you for those in attendance. I'm going to turn it back over to Deirdre or Janet to send us off. Thank you.
Thank you for attending. We appreciate your time and all that you do. And please feel free to reach out to us. Email during this time sometimes works better, but we will definitely be responding.
Likewise,
Thank you.
We appreciate the work that you do. Have a great afternoon.